welcome to hashtag Webinar Wednesday. We've got a terrific webinar in place for you. Thank you to the more than 190 people who signed up to be participants. And we have Professor Guy Ben-Gurion, who's going to talk about what to expect from Israel's next election, how we got into this situation, and what's at stake. But before going there, I just want to give a little promo for our next event, or a big event coming up called Celebrating the Remarkable, where Dr. Ruth K. Westheimer will be receiving her first and only honorary doctorate from a university in Israel, Ben-Gurion University. And we will also be honoring Tony Young, our past president and extraordinary volunteer and philanthropist, as well as Philip Gompertz, the professional who stewarded the largest gift in Israel's history, the incredible Marcus Endowment. So with that, I also want to just thank the people behind the scenes, Melody Mokhtarian, Liz Kirshner, Dana Ben-Benjamin, and also Kara Bortman. We're live on Facebook. So thank you everybody for joining us. Guy, this has been a little bit crazy, fourth election in 2 years' time. Let me just give a quick bio. You've been with us before, people know you. We're lucky to have you, both as a faculty member, but also on today's webinar. And just to remind everybody who's joined us, if you have questions during this program, just click on the Q&A function. You can ask your question there and I'll then send them to Guy. The format will be basically a discussion. There's no formal presentation. Things are too fluid to create a PowerPoint. So we encourage the audience to participate. But let me start with a brief introduction. Professor Guy Ben-Gurion chairs the Department of Politics and Government at Ben-Gurion University of the Negev. His expertise is in comparative politics and public policy. He's the co-author of the recently released book, Policing Citizens, Minority Policy in Israel, and the author of several other books, quite a prolific member of our faculty. One of his key books is Between State and Synagogue, The Secularization of Contemporary Israel, which won the Yonatan Shapiro Award for Best Book in Israel Studies, and the Gideon Doron Best Book Award from the Israel Political Science Association. He's a popular and respected teacher. He's won several faculty and teaching awards from Ben-Gurion University. Professor Ben-Gurion received his BA in Political Science and Psychology from Tel Aviv University and his PhD in Political Science from Johns Hopkins University. Welcome back to hashtag Webinar Wednesday, Guy.
Thank you for the introduction.
One other quick thing I forgot to mention at the beginning is, because there's so much happening, it's been a big week at BGU. In the last week, we introduced, had put out an announcement that we're launching Israel's first School of Sustainability and Climate Change that leverages the multidisciplinary expertise at the university. We'll learn more about that later in a future webinar. And just yesterday, the New Jersey Governor, Phil Murphy, announced the Memorandum of Understanding, a breakthrough relationship between the New Jersey Institute of Technology and Ben-Gurion University on what's called the Institute for Future Technologies, with a focus on cybersecurity, civil engineering, and environmental engineering. And I loved BGU President Professor Daniel Shamovitz's quote. He called it BGU on the Hudson. So many exciting things, but let's talk about the election. Okay, Guy, 4 elections in 2 years. How did we even get ourselves into this situation?
I'm not sure even Israelis can answer that question. Well, the simple answer would be that because of Israel's electoral system, in which we need a coalition of at least 61 members of the parliament, and because we are split into many parties with no one large party able to get enough support and get enough partners, then we are again in situations of unstable coalitions who tend to break apart. And it's being a prophet is a risky business, but one could say that the next election will not be 4 years from now. I think that'll be a safe prophecy.
So let's talk a little bit about Netanyahu. He's now served as the longest prime minister, any prime minister longer than Ben-Gurion. What's kind of at stake for him and also his policies?
So this election is a very personal election, as were the previous ones. If you look at the parties and what they are debating at the moment, it's basically with or without Netanyahu. This is the main question. Who will be the next prime minister? If you look at the contending parties, which those who claim to want to be the next prime minister, whether it's Naftali Bennett of the right-wing religious party, Yair Lapid of the centrist party, or Gideon Sa'ar of the New Hope party, which is a split from the Likud, the argument between them is whether Netanyahu is fit to be a prime minister. And when they say fit, it's mainly about the corruption charges and the trial he's facing. So at Netanyahu's hand is a experience, the claim that he has done a good job as a prime minister. He was able to bring vaccinations to Israel, make it a leader in the number of vaccinations. On the minus side for him is, again, allegation charges and a trial which will begin in April with serious charges, an economy that's been staggering, and the fact that other than the vaccination, Israel has not coped that well with the COVID-19. But the elections are mostly about Netanyahu and whether he should continue as a prime minister.
Let's talk a little bit about the vaccination because, of course, here in the States, it's speeding up now, but the whole world has been envious of Israel's efforts. Startup Nation became Vaccination with its rapid plan to vaccinate its population. I believe now over half of the population has received at least one shot and close to half 2 shots. It's really just truly remarkable. So, I mean, it was the right thing to do. Was it really a political strategy, do you believe, on his part in any way?
Well, I think Netanyahu, from the get-go, took the COVID-19 very seriously. I mean, unlike Donald Trump, who tried to put down and say it's not that serious, Netanyahu, from the start, took it very seriously. And I think his strategy was, because he had to make all these compromises with his coalition partners, with the ultra-Orthodox. So all these closures were hard to implement. And he had to make all these concessions. His bet was on the vaccinations. Now, to his advantage, it's a small country that has a pretty good health system that could administer the vaccinations in a very short time. So he brought the vaccinations, or under his pressure, but the way that it was given to the population was very much due to a very, very well-established health system that is trusted, that is well spread over the country, that proved to be very efficient. So the whole operation was very, very smooth from many perspectives.
And I read recently that in the polls, his numbers are looking good. People seem to be overlooking maybe the corruption because of his leadership on the vaccination and his experience.
His numbers are looking good considering all that we've been through, but they're not looking good enough at the moment for him. At the moment, by the polls, Netanyahu has about 30 mandates, 30 seats in the Knesset. The ultra-Orthodox parties, which are his allies, have another 15. That's about 45. He needs 16 more members to support him. Can he get that? It's a very tough question, and what the price will have to pay for that. So polls are looking good for him, considering the fact that he's facing a trial of corruption. But other than that, it's not good enough at the moment.
Let's back up just for a minute because we have a lot of people that have joined us. Thank you to the participants, really good attendance today and a lot of new people. let's just back up for a little bit on Israel's parliamentary democracy and just explain the challenge of forming the coalition and kind of what's at stake here for center-right or center-left policies, including two-state solution.
Right. So Israel's elections is a multi-party election, and the parliament nominates the next prime minister. So when the elections are over, the president, who is mostly a representative position, that's his most important role. He calls in the leaders of the parties and asks them, who will you support for prime minister? Now, the prime minister, the person who will get to form the coalition, is the one that has the largest chance to form a coalition, which has to be of 61 members of the parliament. Out of 120, that's the majority. So at the moment, let's say that Netanyahu has these 30 members of his own party, which will make him the largest party in the Knesset. He has another 15 members of the ultra-Orthodox parties who said they will stand with him. That's 45. Now he needs to get 16 more members of the Knesset to vote for him. That's where you have to begin negotiations and bargaining. Now that's a very tough process, and it's going to be even tougher this election, I think.
So talk a little bit about Naftali Bennett.
So Naftali Bennett is one of the Netanyahu's challengers. He forms a right-wing religious party, which historically has been an ally of the Labor Party. But since the 1970s, they moved to the right. They support the settlement policies. They support large Israel. So the Likud is their natural partner. Now, this party for years has been always a minor party, a sectoral party. It represents the all the religious right, which is a minority of about 10% of the people in Israel. So they have about between 5 to 12 members of the Knesset, and they were usually occupied with the territories and with religious issues. Naftali Bennett, who came in about 10 years ago, tried to change the party, make it a catch-all party, appeal to more voters. So, for example, his second in command, Ayelet Shaked, is a secular woman. So now they're trying to appeal to the public as a party that has a concern with economics, very neoliberal economics, has concerns with security, right-wing policies, and Bennett thinks of himself as a potential prime minister. What stands between him and that is Netanyahu.
Let's talk a little bit about Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid.
Benny Gantz is the person who came the most close to defeating Netanyahu. In the last election, Benny Gantz came very close. It was a party that brought together Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz and a few others. It was the party, what's called the party of the generals. Had about 3 ex-generals that were leaders of the party, and Yair Lapid was not. I think what we're seeing in these elections is that generals have disappeared. They simply disappeared. So Gabi Ashkenazi, who is the foreign minister, who is an ex-general, is retiring. Moshe Ya'alon retired. And Benny Gantz, at the moment, at most, will pass the threshold. So Gantz at the moment is not a very significant player, although in some coalition building he could be. I mean, there is potential for that. But the fact that in last elections, Netanyahu convinced Gantz to build with him the next government and promised him a rotation of prime ministership. And since in Gantz's party, the blue and white party, Lapid objected to that and withdrew from the party, Gantz came to the coalition with a very small party. So they had 32. And when Netanyahu offered him the deal, only 15 people came with him. 17 stayed outside. So Gantz came to the coalition with a rather small party. He struck a deal with Netanyahu in which Netanyahu was supposed to give him the prime ministership next November. But Netanyahu, depends who you ask, but the Gantz will tell you Netanyahu simply cheated him. Netanyahu has been dishonest, has done everything possible to break up the coalition, which brought Benny Gantz to declare that the next election should come in. So at the moment, Gantz heads a very small party. He has gained some respect in recent months for standing up to Netanyahu, which he hasn't done in the year before that. And that will gain him at most about 6 members of the parliament. Yair Lapid has chosen the opposition path about a year ago, decided to split from Gantz and not to join Netanyahu. He has been persistent in opposing Netanyahu and positioning himself as an alternative to Netanyahu. The public still does not see Lapid as a serious contender. So when you ask people about who is fit to be prime minister, Netanyahu, I think, gets about 40% of the vote. Lapid gets about 20% of the vote, which doesn't say anything because it's election policies. Lapid has been trying to pull himself a bit away from the scene, trying to kind of play the party, not himself. Netanyahu is pulling him back in. So it's either me or Lapid. Netanyahu's strategy has been to position Lapid as the alternative. If you don't vote for me, you get Lapid. So anyone who thinks of voting for a party that's not Likud, that's the risk. So Lapid is the contender. What's the potential of him to replace Netanyahu? Very hard to tell at the moment.
Yeah, so it feels like this is really leaning center right, but we don't know who the prime minister is going to be. Is that accurate?
Yes. So Lapid will be the most leftist of the contenders, and he has described himself as centrist right. That's how he describes himself. So on economic matters, he's a neoliberal. On security matters, he is a bit to the right. In terms of religious issues, he is secular, so he's more liberal. But he's very centrist. I mean, his party has always tried to occupy the center position. Then you have Gideon Saar, who is from the Likud, he's split from Netanyahu, who is very right-wing, and Naftali Bennett. So it's going to be a right-wing coalition. It's just the question how right, and with or without Netanyahu.
So Andrea Gorin, our treasurer, one of our board members, he's asking, whatever happened to the Labor Party? Any chance of its numbers growing in the future?
Future is a hard thing to tell. Labor Party has been considered dead in the water a few months ago. They chose a new leader, Merav Michaeli, who is a feminist, an ex-journalist, very well spoken, very charismatic to some respect, and she has been able to revive the party. But to revive means that from being dead to having able to get about 6-7 members of the parliament. That's considered a miracle. Will the party be able to revive itself? It's a hard question to tell because the center has gone to Lapid, the left has gone to Meretz or to the Arab parties, so they are competing for a very, very small pool of the votes from the start. So becoming dominant again, kind of a large party of 30 members, I mean, anything can happen, but it doesn't seem likely at the moment.
We've got a good question from Larry Rosner. He's asking, he's astounded, as many of us are, by how few votes each party gets. So what's the underlying reason for that? Is it demographics are changing? Is it ideologies? Is it just the number of parties?
It's a process that began in the 1970s, that the large parties gradually began to lose their power. So Labour Party went down in the 1970s, Likud became the power party, but never at the size of the Labour Party, of the historic Labour Party. And since then, it was always about building coalitions. And because of the demographics of the country, because of the fact that small parties can actually gain from coalition building. So if you're a Russian immigrant, if you're ultra-Orthodox, or if you're right-wing, you might be better off with voting for your party and having it in the coalition than for a large catch-all party. So at the moment, the two largest parties are the Likud with about 30, at the moment, predicting about 30 members of the Knesset, and the Lapid party with about 20. That's what the polls are showing now. So that's 50. All the rest is split between many parties, and that's why we are seeing so much instability.
We're also getting a question about the voting process. So only Israelis that live in Israel get to vote. If you're an expat and you're living in the States or somewhere else. So the question is in the future, will there be mail-in votes, or do you think the current policies will continue?
It came up now with the COVID-19. So kind of, maybe under these circumstances, we should consider that. It's not very likely because, as you recall, the law of return provides every Jewish person with a potential citizenship, which means that a country of 9 million can have an expats potentially of another 6-7 millions, which gives a much power to people that don't live in Israel. So the question is it justified that people that don't live in Israel will have a stake in its future? Now, I mean, you can answer it in different ways, but I think at the moment for most Israelis, that's not really a question on the table. So I don't think it's a question. I mean, this might be a debate in the U.S., but it's not a large debate in Israel. I mean, there's no one who's bringing up and saying, well, let's push this forward.
Yeah, I mean, many of us feel we have a stake in Israel's future, but it doesn't give us a right to vote. And if you leave the country and live somewhere else, it does seem reasonable you lose that right. So if you do want to vote, you got to live in Israel to vote.
Yeah, but also think of the percentage-wise. So if you think of the American elections, what percent of the elections are votes that come from abroad? I don't think it's very big. Probably very, but if you're talking about here about 20, 30% of potential votes from abroad, I mean, that's a big chunk of the voters. And I think that's problematic. So I think there's a symbolic value in that. So yes, Jews have a stake in Israel, of course. But then when you talk about the consequences of giving people that live abroad a chance to actually determine the election, not just to participate, then that becomes a bit questionable.
So we're getting a bunch of questions here building at the end. So this is great. You haven't just held your audience, Guy. The audience has grown during this webinar. So as we're talking, the word's out that this is very interesting. Thank you. So there are a few questions along the lines of, our relations with the United States and Biden's presidency, is that playing a role at all in all of this?
So the Trump administration has been very good for Netanyahu. So Netanyahu has really made a lot from the Trump administration on several accounts. First, it took the pressure off the Palestinian question. So Netanyahu did not have an American government breathing down its neck to make any attempts for peace with the Palestinians, which I think in the long run is terrible. In the short run, Netanyahu has definitely gained from that. Also, the Trump administration has moved the embassy to Jerusalem, has recognized the Golan Heights as part of Israel, and of course, created the peace agreements with the Gulf countries. So this has been, from Netanyahu's perspective, a good administration. The Biden administration might make Netanyahu's life a bit more difficult, because Netanyahu is going to have a right-wing coalition, which is what he requires at the moment. And this right-wing coalition will pressure him for annexation of the West Bank, for building more settlements. That might bring him into collision with the Biden administration. So Netanyahu might have a more difficult term as a prime minister than he had in the previous administration. And this also might shorten the lives of the next coalition. Because if Netanyahu is going to be the middle centrist in this coalition, and it's going to be another right-wing party who will press him to do more in the West Bank, and an administration that will press him to do the opposite, that's where governments fall apart in Israel. So I think there's a huge impact to the change in the U.S.
Thank you. We're going to have to wrap up now, but I wanted to bring up the joint list or the Arab parties. There's been some coverage about Iran, which split off from the joint list. They may end up being the kingmaker because they're willing to build a coalition either on the left or the right, as long as the needs of the Arab Israeli citizens are met. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think that's an example of Netanyahu's pragmatism or cynicism, depends what you think of Netanyahu. Netanyahu, in recent administrations, has been very much anti-Arab on many, many accounts. The nationality law and other statements against Arab citizens. At the same time, however, he has made economic plans to better the lives of Arabs in Israel. Now, this might seem contradictory, but I think it's part of Netanyahu's strategic thinking. If I can provide Arab citizens with higher living standards, with better jobs, with more income, this might compensate them for political rights. That was his strategy. Now, the Arab Party has always been on the left, but many of the leftist parties were reluctant to cooperate with it. So in the last elections, Benny Gantz could build a coalition with the Arab parties. But within his own party, there was opposition to that. So Gantz had a choice. Go to another election, build a coalition with the Arab party, and lose my own party, or at least part of it, and maybe not be able to form a coalition, or join Netanyahu. So Arab parties, and this is history in making, about a year ago, were non-partners, illegitimate partners. Netanyahu kind of said to Benny Gantz and to his supporters, Gantz will bring in the Arab parties. You can't trust him. He is disloyal. So Gantz was discredited for even thinking of building coalition with the Arab parties. A few months ago, Netanyahu has begun to try and split the Arab party in the middle, try and pull them towards him. And he brought Mansour Abbas, who was leader of the Ram party, and basically bought him off. Said, listen, cooperate with me. I will provide you with better life for Arabs. And Mansour Abbas bought the deal. Now, is he going to cross the threshold line? Good question. This party is still in between. You need to have at least 30% of the vote to cross the threshold line. Mansour Abbas is not there yet, or at least he's in there. Will Netanyahu actually get votes from Arabs? Netanyahu has been touring the Arab villages and cities, trying to convince Arabs to vote for him. This is the prime minister who 2 years ago encourages voters to go and vote because the Arabs are coming to vote in large numbers. So after this, he comes himself to the Arabs. So again, pragmatism, cynicism. Now, I'm not sure where this is going, but on the optimist side, I mean, at least for me, he made the Arabs legitimate partners. So there's a precedent here. So if Netanyahu has made the Arabs legitimate partners, now Lapid says, I can also work with the Arabs. He wouldn't say that 2 years ago. So I think the Ram party, it began with a short-term Netanyahu calculation. How do I get 61 seats? How do I weaken the left? How do I split the Arab parties? This is very pragmatic politics. but there's a precedent here, which I'm not sure he meant, but could be revolutionary. And that's, I think, could be something that we will talk about in the next years to come.
Well, Guy, thank you very much. The audience is probably a little bit like me. We're feeling maybe even more confused before we started this webinar, but
Welcome to the club.
But we're enlightened, and we're sure glad you're there to help us understand and give us insight into this election and what's at stake. So again, just a reminder to our audience about our terrific event on April 25th. It's free, celebrating the remarkable. Ask your friends and family, everybody who loves Israel and even loves sex. It's the perfect webinar for you. It's not a webinar, it's an event. It's going to be terrific. Also join us for our next webinar, Advancing Women's Health in Underserved Communities, on Wednesday, March 31st, with Dr. Lynn Quittel and the Medical School for International Health alumni, Rachel Pope, as well as a current student. That will be terrific. David Ben-Gurion, the founder of Israel and first prime minister, and the guy whose name is on the door of our university, once said that the test of democracy is the freedom of its criticism. And by that standard, I think Israel has about as robust a democracy as could ever exist on the planet. So thank you, Guy, for sharing your insight. Thank you all for joining us. Chag Pesach Sameach, we have Passover coming up, and we wish everyone to stay safe and be well. Thank you for joining us.